can you tell us a bit about your time at NSCAD as well? What were you studying and who with and what was going on?
So I came from Ontario as well. Like Ben, I transferred from York University, and I had seen John Greer give a talk at York University, and I abandoned York University, um, hot-footed it over to NSCAD along with another sculpture student, Chris Brown, and he and I arrived there, and we were very firmly in the sculpture world. Not I wasn't very interested in the other art forms or something like that. I was very focused on making things that were kind of three-dimensional and so there was people like John Greer, Dennis Gill, Michael Fernandez, and then later on Gary Neal Kennedy and John Little, the blacksmith from Eastover, and yeah, so blacksmithing was a big part of my time there. A lot
Oh,
of
wow. Okay, amazing. Well, I love to hear so many familiar names and some new names to me too. Um, and I want to talk to you both a bit about like what some of the things that you learned in NSCAD, how they've maybe carried with you in this, in your career. Um, Ben, what are some of the ways that your education at NSCAD has sort of shaped what you do now?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned before that I think the humor that I got, the sense of humor that I saw in, Gary Kennedy's work and some of the artists that were there at the time and had just graduated, like Sandy Plotnikoff and some other Lucy Pullen.
Mm.
Um, there was just a good kind of vibe going on that seemed to not take yourself too seriously, but still like double down and take your art really seriously, even if it's a joke.
Mm.
And I really that really resonated with me, and I feel like that has I've continued that kind of that feeling in some of my work, that the levity, I guess.
Okay, I like that very much. Max, what about you? What are some of the things that you have taken from your time at NSCAD?
well, I mean, there's so many of the little skills that I learned through the technical aspects of being at NSCAD, but the I think a lot of the what helped me from NSCAD was the name brand.
Mm.
Opened a lot of doors, especially here in New York. There's a lot of people out of the art form and interview magazine world that just, knew NSCAD and opened doors for me. And so um, that was just a really helpful thing for me to go uh, initiate relationships with.
That's great.
I
And
love to hear
Lucy Pullen is here in New York. I don't know. She was
Yes.
here. She was here at my studio a couple of days ago.
Oh, wow, great.
Yeah, we're working on some stuff together.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah, I knew her
that. Oh, cool.
too, at the end of the '90s.
Nice. And then she's still got a Halifax connection. She still shows here a bit, so that's nice to hear.
Mhm.
Um, well, Max, I wanted to ask you about your work in New York, actually. Maybe you could tell us a bit about your job as a fabricator, master fabricator, and faction who you work with, and the kind of role you have and the projects you work on.
So I work mainly as a studio manager, but also as a project manager, and um, I do a lot of product design and stuff like that. So um, we're a very small firm. There's 12 to 20 of us, depending on the day, and I really am the kind of conduit between the designers and how things get built. So I do a lot of the red lines of drawings. I arm wrestle with designers over how things can be built or should be built and how that's going to affect their end use. And then I take that out and see if we can actually get it done in the shop. So I spend a lot of time, you know, um, going through ideas with folks here inside the design studio, and then go out into the studio and literally with other folks try and bolt that all together and make that all work. And that really is different on a day-to-day basis because we really do a lot of different materials and a lot of different venues. And so right now I'm doing something really uh, traditional. We're doing big aluminum casting. And so we're going through the mold making process of that.
Mhm.
But it could also be working on like a elevator or mechanical elements that go into a show or lighting aspects and other things like that. So every day is really quite a different palette, as it were.
I have a question, Max. Does
Yeah.
your do the clients you have, do they ever come with a fully baked design and they just need somebody to fabricate it, or do they come wanting the designers to pitch back to them based on a brief that they give you?
Yeah, that's client. I mean, in terms of my career, it's gone the gamut. In terms of our firm right here, right now, it is usually we're here to co-create. So for the last 2 years, we've been one-on-one with Jordan Roth. He's been our main client, and we really work through right from concept to end product, what that is with him, and it's a back and forth process. But I mean, I've been in situations where the client is you know, uh, Norman Foster, and he says, "I want this bed for Obama," and it's a fully
Wow.
detailed piece, and we just build the bed, right? So,
Yeah.
um, it runs the entire gamut.
Hmm. Cool.
Great question, Ben. Thank you. I want to talk to you a little bit about your practice now too, because I think the overlap that I'm seeing in both of your careers and practices is this really like wide range of skills in materials and like approach to materials as artists and fabricators. And there was like one piece of yours that I saw that kind of range really captured, and it was the piece 2-inch solid cubes. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about this project and how it fits into your overall practice in terms of materiality and process.
Sure. So that is really just a collection of mine. It's like a material sample library
Mhm.
and an ongoing lifelong project. You know, whether it is an artwork in itself is kind of, it's a little wishy-washy because I'm not ever like selling it, and I've only shown it in a show once, which was like a little over a year ago, and that was the first time I had them all on display. And I built a nice light box table to display them all on instead of them being on shelves in my studio. And there's about, I'd say there's 320 to 50 cubes that are of different materials, you know, and some of them are composites, but I'm trying to keep it to solid materials. There's a whole section of like metals from the periodic table, and there's uh, plastics and resins and foams and stone and minerals and waxes. There's a whole section in wax. And this, I decided about 11 years ago that it would be it started with just thinking about wooden cubes and how a
Mm.
set of wooden blocks that are all different woods with the name in them could be a good teaching aid, having of density and grain and just the look of different woods would be nice to have a set. And so I started doing that, and then it very quickly was like, why am I limiting myself to woods? Woods are boring.
Mm.
So it quickly grew from there. And the 2 inches just kind of keeps it all, you know, in a way that's pleasing to in a grid. It can store easily. Just kind of appealed to that kind of OCD nature of just keeping everything in line.
No, it's great. And it really shows, I think, like, yeah, like such a diversity in the kind of materials you work with, and it like captures it in this very compact and helpful way.
Yeah, like sometimes at work we'll be talking about something and a material will come up
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, let me go get that right now. And I'll go grab the thing and we have it in the meeting to look at and hold. And it might be, an amber silicone or something, or urethane rubber, or it might be, you know, a, a particular type of wood that
Mhm.
about using. Yeah. And I don't get into finishes with them. So that would just, you know, uh, bring it into this unmanageable size if I started doing finishes on all these different things. So I'm trying to keep it to the material properties themselves and not these are all the different varnishes and surface treatments that I can do on these. That's
Right.
somebody else's project.
Well, now my question to both of you is thinking about this kind of like wide array of skills that you're both working with. I was wondering if there's like certain kind of training you did post NSCAD for any, like you clearly covered a lot of ground at NSCAD, but was there additional training you took on, Max, to do some of the work you're doing now? Where did you learn some of these skills?
When you sent the list of questions beforehand, I was looking at that, and it was really funny because I was talking about it with my boss here, and we're like, "Oh, that's easy. It's like I work with people with unrealistic expectations, and they really make you hone in on your skills, right?" So
Yeah.
they just I think that's been the thing is that I work with people who have very wide, very they swing for the fences so that you've got people who are really designing and making things that are difficult. And so you're always in the process of learning how to make a material go a little bit further um, or use something for what it wasn't intended for. And it's that circumstance that's really kind of fed my development.
Okay, nice. So there's kind of like collaborative and people around you.
Yeah, the people
Teachers
are
or
are always making, requests that's just a little bit further
okay.
than the norm.
Nice. I love that. Ben, what about you? What were some of the techniques you picked up post NSCAD and how did you pick them up?
After NSCAD, I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago to do a
Uh-huh.
master's in art and technology. And the skills I learned there were not that technical, actually. They were studio practice based. I did take an advanced screen printing course and learned some cool, like technical stuff with that, but haven't used it too much since. And and then I guess it's just been on the job experience. I started working for Urban Outfitters doing displays in their stores after the Art Institute, and then got picked up by Aritzia, who needed help with their window program. And it's just like what I tend to do with the Aritzia job is I'm always kind of challenging myself to work with techniques and materials that are new to me a little bit, and I'm just to gain more and more experience with that. And I love watching how it's made, for example, or MythBusters, those types of nuts and bolts. Um, of makers, and you can learn
Yeah.
just by watching those things, trying them, experimenting in your studio. We're lucky enough to have a big uh, prototyping studio, with woodworking, mold making, metalwork. I've got some in-house fabricators that I can work with that we experiment with and try to make things. They have a variety of skills. And then we often just we'll test and prototype something so that we know what we want. And then we tell our fabricator that's usually overseas, this is what we need you to replicate. And often we're teaching them how to do it.
Mm.
And sometimes they're coming back with, we ran into this problem for production and this is the compromise. This is how we're going to do it. Sometimes it just isn't scalable. I'm currently
Right.
working on a summer window that is all hand needle felted strawberries.
Mm.
And, the counts are in the thousands. And, I had a prototype made by a person that took a month to make a strawberry, a leaf, and a flower. And we need thousands made in a month. So
Nice.
it's a little different, and we rely on our fabricators to figure out how to scale that process.
Well, this is great because my next question for both of you is about like the collaboration process, and how you kind of work collaboratively. And so we've gotten a little bit of insight into that from you, Ben. That's really exciting. And from you, Max, in terms of like how some of these skills were acquired. Um, Max, as a fabricator, what is your relationship to collaboration or outsourcing at Faction and on these projects that you work on?
Uh, that's probably the most difficult part of the job
Yeah.
because I think that if when you get into that, then you're getting into a lot of contract writing and scope description and stuff like that. And if you haven't really fully fleshed out an idea, it's just still an idea, and you want to get somebody else to do a part of it, then really casting that off as an item, you really have to be able to get your head around it and describe it in all the different ways. And that helps, you know, keep the project going in the right direction and the object coming back being
Mm.
what you had anticipated it being. But so that whole communication process is really, really difficult and really, really challenging. And we spend a lot of time in-house just doing documents in order to um, reinforce that relationship and structure that relationship rather than just it's a collaborative thing between people who just chat it out. We spend a lot of time giving those quantifying those details and stuff like that.
In paperwork, basically.
It's horrible. Yeah.
Red
and
tape.
and a lot of drawings, a lot of like
Yeah.
technical. The majority of the people here are are doing the technical drawings to send off to collaborators or back to the client in order to get uh, uh, that sort of review process done
Mhm.
before it gets to an actual prototype or anything like that. So that is the tough part of the job. It's the collaboration.
Yeah. Do you sometimes feel like you're have to be the reality check for the dreamer requests, or do you get to be kind of like dreaming big, or is like what's that relationship like?
No, I it's good to be in this particular shop because there's the the folks around me are real cheerleaders, right? And
That's
with
good.
enough
Yeah.
cheerleaders, you can like do stupid things that aren't really attainable in a normal world. So yeah, that having having the people around you who push you to do the tough things. That I'm definitely the dreamer too. Yeah.
Good. That's what I would like to hear. Ben, you've spoken a bit about your relationship to collaboration when you're like outsourcing this work. Does your role, like you as an artist and also someone kind of working with other fabricators, does your experience as a maker yourself kind of influence those relationships and how you approach them?
Yes, and I feel like the my experience and skills in making things sometimes gets in the way of thinking blue sky and being the dreamer
Mhm.
because I know the challenges of making the thing.
Yeah.
And my boss, my creative director, he kind of keeps pushing me to not worry about production. Stop worrying about production. Stop worrying about how it's made and all the parameters around how to get it into the windows and the logistics, and it's other people's problems, but I can't help but incorporate those problems in the design process
Yeah.
because it feels like a puzzle to me, and I love puzzles. And when it's all blue sky, it's like an empty canvas or an empty sketchbook. It can be daunting, but as soon as you start putting these like uh, restrictions and parameters and things, then it starts to act like a puzzle, and you're like, oh, and then I fully get engaged and I dig in and like, how can
Mhm.
I solve this and meet the same creative objectives that I've maybe given myself, but still meet the more pragmatic objectives of this needs to be produced en masse. It needs to be shipped all over, across the seas and then redistributed to all these stores. And then, it needs to be installed by amateurs and it needs to fit and it needs to not fall apart and, all these things and meet, budget, you know, needs to be made, in a certain budget, but also look luxury and high end, and
Mhm.
ideally be sustainable. It's like a lot of things that go into it that make it really difficult. Um, but we have this one vendor that we've been working with for maybe 10 years, and he is there. This factory has just been really collaborative and quick to produce prototypes. We do send a lot of technical drawings to him, and it's, we don't want to rely on him uh, to solve things. We want to be able to figure it out so that we know what to expect and not have a surprise at the end, which sometimes happens. Uh,
It sounds like you have a good balance of like practicality and dreaming, which is what, I think a nice combination to have in
yeah,
collaborators and in artists.
yeah. I
Uh,
think that like it's like communication with
uh,
your fabricators and your designers. I'm the designer, but like everybody communicating well is what is gonna lead you to success. For expectation management, when there's changes to the design or to the look, you want to know, you want to manage that and not have it show up late,
yeah.
and get surprised. So sometimes it's a language barrier with our vendor overseas, but I think we're working on that, and every time there's a misstep, he gets a little, a little bit of feedback, being like, you should have just told us you were making that, you were changing that bolt size, and then we wouldn't have run into this problem.
It seems like a lot of problem solving goes into both of your practices. And Max, I was curious about the overlap for you in as a working in restoration and in fabrication, and where you kind of find commonalities or different ways of problem solving between those two sort of disciplines, I guess.
Well, historic restoration has its own kind of parameters to it, so
Yeah.
it doesn't allow you to be as like creative at figuring stuff out. In a lot of cases, you have to go back and find out how it was originally made and how it was, what all the original materials were, and so it can be as individual, like restoring an individual piece could be as individual as the original piece, and the next
Yeah.
one that's identical to it was made slightly different and requires that same differentness in order to make it, and then you're assessing each one differently as in order to maintain the integrity of the
Mm.
original pieces. So I tend not to like have different, fabricator hats that I put on. I really know that I'm a maker, and I just go to the different disciplines with that intention.
Right.
But but in a lot of cases, the historic restoration stuff, it's all very carefully prescribed. There's a whole bunch of like historic restoration architects who write the spec for actually for the process of actually restoring something like that. So um, it's pre-prescribed, and it's about executing that plan.
Yeah. And an understanding of the material and processes involved in all of them, like your skills really
Yeah.
apply in both those directions. Yeah. Well, I was thinking, Ben, too, like you're thinking sort of like historically or traditionally about like you're referencing in your artist bio specifically sign painting, I guess, as something that you're looking at. And I was wondering if you could talk about that kind of traditional art form and why and how it plays into your practice.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of techniques, and this is like a good crossover with Max. Is there's a lot of old world
Yeah.
techniques that have become very niche and archaic, and that there's not a lot of people that know how to do them. And I'm not one. I know a few techniques that I've kind of taught myself. One that I'm proud of is glass gilding, reverse glass gilding that you would see. Well, New York, you see it a lot on storefronts where they've done glass, or I mean gold lettering.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
final. It's done the traditional way, but in smaller towns and smaller cities, good luck finding somebody that knows how to do that. Like they have died. It's an old tradition, and I like that some of the bigger cities have kept it up and have taught younger people how to do it. And I've just used it a bit in my art practice. I'm not somebody that you can contract to do the name of your building.
Right. Don't call Ben to paint your sign. He's busy.
I just don't have the time for it. But I did when it's actually when we opened the first Aritzia in Soho in 2011, and I hired a young sign painter, mural guy. OK Mitch was his name, or his business name at the time. Now it's Overall Murals, and it's a pretty big, like Brooklyn-based mural company. And I had him do Aritzia logos in silver leaf along the bottoms of like these 8 windows on Broadway and Spring. And then I was just watching him like a hawk and asking him so many questions and learning how he's using the stencils and the vinyl stencils, and what is the order of operations and the preparation of materials and the preparation of your surface. And so I took some of those notes, and then I also bought a couple books on glass gilding, watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and then just kept practicing it. And also made some modern, like basically combined some techniques that I've learned in printing to that process that I hadn't seen done before. Like instead of backing up the gold leaf with enamel that you would do in sign painting, I would back up a gold leaf on a sheet of glass with UV flatbed printing, which is a digital, way of printing on a substrate, and then you can remove the gold leaf in the background. And then you have very accurate, and you can do things that you couldn't easily do with a stencil, like a vector-based vinyl stencil, you could do halftone. So I did like a one artwork I did a series of was a halftone image of the Golden Girls TV guide from the 80s. The Golden
Mhm.
Girls featured on the TV guide, and I chose the format of the TV guide and did a 2-layer gold leaf matte and mirror finish on the back of the glass, and it turned out good. And that was using all those techniques I learned and adapted a, a printer that we use in Vancouver,
Mm.
flatbed printing.
Well, what's like so interesting about both of your careers is that I imagine there's like this very what seems like a very symbiotic combination of these much more traditional, older techniques and skills, and this like innovation that's happening right as you're working in design and fabrication. Um, and Max, I want to ask you a bit about a big project you just worked on. I imagine like maybe there's some overlap here in terms of like new or old techniques you're working on. You mentioned Jordan Roth, and you spoke to NSCAD earlier this month about a big project you did, and you and the company did with Paris Fashion Week. Could you tell us a bit about that process and about that project?
Okay, so that project is Jordan Roth had two performances at the Louvre in the Cour Marly, which is one of the old sculpture galleries in the Louvre, and his work is really based off of historic performance art from French turn of the century and prior to turn of the century work. And so there was dressmakers who were making couture that he would wear. And then we replicated a set of wings. It's 45-foot wide wings. We made a backpack for Jordan that fit underneath his couture dress. And then there was carbon fiber poles coming out from that. And then huge sets of wings, all made out of ripstop nylon. And inside
Okay.
the nylon were there was at least 100 tiny little sensors located all throughout the wings. And those wings, as he flapped the wings, there were projectors that were projecting mapping images onto the wings, and they would change the shape of the projection in real time, articulating the images on the wings.
Mm.
Mm.
So we're working with a company out of Las Vegas. I've worked in Las Vegas for 18 years, and we're working with a company out of Las Vegas that does a lot of this incredible projection graphics and stuff like that. And so we would be making the hardware for the backpack and for the wings, and then trying to integrate their sensors into the wings. Another component to that process or that show was we built an elevator. It's very difficult
Mm.
to describe, but it's an elevator that is only 22 inches tall. And it works a little bit like slap bracelets, a combination of slap bracelets and zippers. So if you can imagine three pieces of spring steel that have zipper edges on them that are coiled up like party whistles in a box, and they kind of mesh together. And as they mesh together, they form into a triangle that's structural. And so you can get and this triangular structure creates the elevator in the pyramid that you see Jordan Roth in. And so it only has a profile of like 22, 23 inches tall, and yet can go up 21 feet. And so part of our job was to make a platform and make a context for that hid all the technology and mechanisms, and yet integrated into the space of the Cour Marly, which is this really beautiful white limestone, French white limestone. And so I really leaned hard on my restoration background and faux finishing, and I brought in a number of guys that I had worked with in faux finish from here in New York, and we faux finished all of the staging materials here in New York that went around this elevator and created stage uh, plinths, and we got them all into Paris and assembled them, and it was very, very difficult to tell the difference between the actual uh, um, uh, marble floors and our
Mhm.
staging. And so being able to hide the staging behind all of these faux finishes was kind of the trick to that show.
Cool.
But really exciting to be in the Louvre, do a show there, and
Yeah,
yeah,
that's amazing.
it's the
What opportunity.
first time they allowed a performance to
Oh,
happen in the live space in the collection area. So
wow. And when you were talking to NASCAD, you described it as kind of coming at an opportune time for you. You were like, how did you say? You were wondering how to engage and feel like you were doing meaningful work in your career. And I wanted to ask you sort of like what felt so meaningful about this project and the process of it, and how you try to connect that feeling in other projects.
yeah, that was deeply personal. I had I've worked for a lot of people over the years. I started off right out of grad school working on the Venetian Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, and I built most of the sculpture and the architectural detailing for the outside of that um, um, venue and in the inside, the boats and everything, and you know you reflect on kind of who you work for and what it means in the end. And certainly working for Sheldon Adelson, um, it's not a proud moment in my life. It's not something I really feel strongly about. And also working for a casino, and so as I've been able to, kind of be more selective in who
Mm.
and what I work for, when Jordan Roth came along and we're trying to decide whether we're going to go all in with Jordan Roth and work with him, um, the political climate here in the United States changed at the same time,
Yeah.
and it was really easy for me to see that any world in which Jordan Roth doing his thing uh, was a better world for my daughter to grow up in.
Mhm.
And so, just aligning myself in line with the work in that way just made every day a little bit easier.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that and for helping create this work. There's images in the group chat. Um, and there's an interview with Max on the NASCAD website about working on this project. So thank you, Max. Ben, I want to ask you kind of a bit about, I want to hear some like more about your work as well here to kind of give us some more like visual images. I think the question I had written you was about text, about like what the role text plays in your work. So I think we could go in that direction. Or if you also want to talk about like spectacle, kind of following Max, like I know you do a lot of these big installs that are um, like grand and spectacular. So really if either of those feel inspiring, either text or spectacle or a combination
I
that
can just
you would
speak
like to
to
talk
both
about.
of them. I'll speak to both of them. But the I've been using text in my work, since college, and but it's not something that I've locked myself into and pigeonholed myself as to being a text-based artist that only works that way. I just
Yeah.
find, wordplay interesting, and it also scratches that itch about lettering and sign painting a little bit. Although I don't do a lot of hand lettered stuff. It's usually
Mm.
stenciled through vinyl or printed. But it also, yeah, it also allows the humor part to come through
Yeah.
in a really direct way. I'm interested in the flexibility of and nuance of meaning and and how phrases can be interpreted different ways, even though they're so direct, unlike an abstract image, say. I like walking that line and playing with the multiple meanings or uh, interpretations of words and phrases. And then
Mhm.
for the spectacle thing, I think it's more in the Aritzia practice than my uh, personal art practice. But for example, there's currently on Fifth Ave, there's a giant cat that I designed
Mhm.
that fills a whole window on near the corner of 49th and 5th. And my very good best friend who I've been working with at Aritzia and who I was married to for 20 years and met at NSCAD. Uh,
Mhm.
we still work very closely together, and she works with me at Aritzia. And Genevieve was the producer of that, the fabricator of that giant cat that we named Cathew. And it's like about 16 feet wide by um, maybe 12 feet high, 10 feet high, maybe. And we had to make it in sections so that it could be shipped and install in this window and fit perfectly like a glove inside this window, like kind of pressed up against all the walls. That was a real challenge.
Mhm.
And but we pulled it off and I was happy with the results. And I can only take credit for the concept and creative direction for it. I did very little hands-on stuff with that cat. I was like just directing it. I did work on the eyes. I can take credit for the look of the eyes, but the rest is very much Genevieve and her hand skills and organizational skills.
Okay, I love it. Yeah, and it sounds like, well, both of your practices have this real mix of experimentation of materials and also precision in your skills. And also like it sounds like a bit of sense of play. Like even when I first joined in, you were both talking about this like material that um Max was experimenting with. And I was just curious to ask both of you before we go to questions, what is like the relationship to play and experimentation in your practice? Max, can we start with you?
Uh, Play. I don't think that play is really a part of my personal
Sure.
relationship, but experimentation, I am like always prototyping, always trying to mock up, or yeah, that is, I have always kind of a little. I've got side shelves in my studio, and I've got a range of different things that I'm working on to see if I can get it to do that thing that it can't do.
Mhm.
So I'm always tinkering. I've got half a dozen little projects on the go that are kind of like uh trying to flesh out things that I've been working on for a very long time that I'm hoping can get to a different place. But play is not. I don't think that that's would be the right word for it.
That's
But
it. I like
definitely,
tinkering. I think that's a good word. Thanks, Max. Ben, what about you? Does play apply to your work or a different word fit more?
I, I think it does for sure. I play around in the shop. Sometimes I'm working on little experiments that don't go anywhere, but I want to just get my hands dirty and start seeing where something might come. And that also plays in with collaboration with my coworkers, and we will sometimes be you know, trying out something with no end result in mind. I wish that happened more often because there's sometimes we don't prioritize that or don't give time to play because there's so many things that we need to deliver
Mhm.
on a
Yeah.
daily basis that it's hard to make time for that. But I think as a leader in my department, I bring that sense of play and joy into our everyday work to my coworkers and help inspire them and help them feel that what they're doing is creative and fun and interesting on a day-to-day basis. I wanted to talk some more about what you were saying about old traditional forms of sculpture and new traditional forms and or techniques, really tools. But what I've had the opportunity to work with both in at Aritzia, and one way that we have gotten props mass, made, I don't know en masse, but like a large size of multiples, I should say, is that we would have a sculptor make one out of wax clay, like monster clay, and they're sculpting it. And then we have that 3D scanned. And then we take that scan and then we can manipulate the scan digitally in like um, Blender, for example, software, and we can scale it, we can tweak it, we can change the texture, add more texture, add or remove things. But you're starting from something that somebody actually sculpted by hand, and then at a high resolution scan, you can send that file. You basically just email that file to anywhere in the world, and they can 3D print it, or they could CNC carve that out of foam 10 feet high, even though it was sculpted this big. And those that ability to use the best of both worlds when you want to have the control of and and see right away the push pull of materials in real space, and have a sculptor make a thing that you can hold in your hands that is the model for a large thing is very rewarding to see that process through from start to finish. The other thing that I wanted to point out that I thought was interesting too, when I've looked back at how, or when I've, film props are something that is a whole other world, but is maybe more related to my world uh,
Mm.
than Max's. But styrofoam is the go-to solid material that is inexpensive and easy to carve either by hand or by machine, and it's lightweight. It comes in different densities. It's relatively inexpensive, but it's not eco-friendly. It's difficult to recycle, especially once you've coated it with other materials. But I don't know exactly the year styrofoam was like available in the market, like at this scale, but it was probably in the 60s, 50s or 60s. And before that, you know, large set, large props for either theater or various,
Film and
yeah, film. It would be all done with clay and plaster, and these are more sustainable materials. They're heavy, and that the techniques of working with clay and plaster on large things, there's not a lot of people, at least in North America, that still have those skills. They just are working with digital tools and styrofoam. What do you think about that, Max? Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I started out in the EPS world. When I went to my first job out of grad school was to go and work on the facades of the Venetian,
Mhm.
and that was all conceived as EPS foam with a coating on it. And so they had hired a firm that was connected to a Canadian firm. That's how I got down there. Uh, uh, and they were going to build this whole, it's massive facades, interior, exterior, all out of styrofoam. But the fire codes wouldn't allow them to do it, and immediately everything switched into plaster and concrete. And
Mm.
so I had the unique experience of working with a whole bunch of, and we trained a whole bunch of people, like 500-600 people, how to make plaster and concrete parts and molds
Cool.
for that one particular process or one particular project.
Mm.
And yeah, I love that, the AGO has that huge wing of
And
more sculptures that are all plaster, right? That's
gorgeous.
just the most incredible thing. And then you can see like the immediacy of the plaster work and stuff like that. And that's kind of a rare thing that Canada kind of has, is that
I love
collection.
that, and seeing the tool marks in the plaster that, normally those would be models that molds were made from, and then the public only gets to see the bronze version.
Right. Well, I was working on a set of Tiffany windows here, and we were having to replace some broken pieces of glass at Bergdorf Goodman. I think
Yeah.
it's
Cool.
Goodman. And they were broken, and so I glued them all together, took a mold off it, and as I was taking the mold off the glass, I was finding the handprints of the original artist that had translated through the whole process of plaster making to glass making to my molds,
Mm.
and
Wow.
seeing the hands of the original person from
That's
frame get all the way here to this time. So that's fun stuff. It's when you can actually see the actual hands of the original creator in there.
Mhm.
That's so charming. Well, what's been wonderful about talking with both of you today is that there is this, yeah, like strong connection to traditional techniques in your work and materials, and also this like innovative technological side to what you're doing. So thank you both for showing us the kind of, the gamut, the range of ways that contemporary artists are working today and fabricators are working. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. It was wonderful to talk with you. Check out more of Ben and Max's work, and we'll see you next time for the next artwork. Thanks, everybody.